In this world, some legends are about conquest, while others are about protection. When the smoke of war obscures the sky, when the instinct for survival overwhelms everything else, can we still hear amidst the endless sands that gentle whinny deep within our hearts? Today, I want to take you into a memory long sealed away by history, to touch that scorching desert, and to feel how a group of ordinary men and their life-bonded war horses on the edge of despair used their flesh and blood to break through lines of steel. This was not merely a military victory, it was a solemn transcendence of the limits of life itself. The story takes place in the Middle East in 1917. The fires of the First World War had already spread to this ancient land. Palestine, the promised land flowing with milk and honey, was now covered in artillery fire. 2 British offensives at Gaza had ended in disastrous defeat, and tens of thousands of casualties had stained this desert with a blood-red hue that could never be washed away. At this moment, the war had fallen into a deathly stalemate. The coalition forces of Turkey and Germany held the defensive lines in a stranglehold, and the British desperately needed a victory to break the balance of power in the Middle East. Against this grand backdrop, the camera focuses on a few insignificant figures. They did not wave sabers and charge like traditional cavalry. They were mounted infantry, riding to the battle, dismounting to fight.
Sergeant, what's the news from Gaza?
Another bloody disaster, sir. They reckon on 18,000 casualties.
They're all good ones to be out of. It's a bugger of a way to spend a war.
With emu plumes tucked into their hats, their faces bore the weathering and unbridled spirit of the Australian outback. The story begins with the bitterness of parting.
Well, Chevelle's been given command of the whole desert column. The regiment will be moving out in 10 minutes.
We'll split up and have a look round.
During a fierce skirmish, Frank, a core member of the squad, was unfortunately hit in the leg. In that desolate valley, his comrades were forced to make a difficult choice. That single gunshot not only ended the life of a horse, but also left a scar on everyone's heart. Frank was sent to the rear hospital, and his vacancy needed to be filled. It was then that Dave Mitchell entered our view. What kind of person was Dave Mitchell? He was young, green, and his eyes held a clarity that seemed entirely out of place on a battlefield. He came from Preston, south of Melbourne, where his father ran a ranch. To those veterans who had long struggled on the line between life and death, Dave Mitchell was practically a child who hadn't been weaned yet. When Dave Mitchell walked into the tent with his pack, he was met with the scrutinizing and even exclusionary gazes of the veterans. Taz, in particular, a seemingly cold and ruthless hard man, was filled with distrust toward the newcomer Dave Mitchell. In his view, the battlefield had no place for innocence. Innocence would only get people killed. However, Dave Mitchell possessed a special gift, a perception for horses. When he stroked a horse's back, when he looked into its eyes, the connection seemed innate. But in the eyes of his comrades, this could not mask his fatal weakness as a soldier. He could not bring himself to kill. In target practice, Dave Mitchell's marksmanship was incredibly precise.
Not bad at all.
Neither do rabbits.
What's happening, Taz?
Turk's got a railway out to the east. Brass reckon that's ramping our style a bit so we can blow it up.
It's bloody Turkish cavalry.
But on a real patrol mission, when the back of a Turkish soldier appeared in his sights, his finger froze. This kind of hesitation is fatal on the battlefield. It concerns not only Dave Mitchell's own life, but the safety of the entire squad. Taz saw this and burned with anxiety. During that skirmish, if the veterans hadn't reacted quickly, Dave Mitchell's hesitation could very well have led to the destruction of the entire unit. Afterward, Taz angrily confronted Dave Mitchell, his words full of frustration and tough love. In Tass's view, once you put on the uniform, you must learn to put away that superfluous mercy.
I've just had some bad news. Frank died in Cairo yesterday.
Just as Dave Mitchell was struggling in agony, bad news arrived from the hospital in Cairo. Frank had died from an infected wound. This news was like a giant boulder weighing heavily on everyone's heart. The brother who had once laughed with them and faced death with them was gone forever. The veterans masked their grief with silence, while Tass became even more irritable and sensitive. He transformed the pain of losing a comrade into even stricter demands on Dave Mitchell. He was afraid that this new kid would, like Frank, become just another cold name on a casualty list. A subsequent air raid became the turning point for Dave Mitchell's integration into the group. That day, the roar of enemy planes tore through the tranquility of the camp. Bombs fell, and flames shot into the sky. While everyone else was busy finding cover to save their lives, Dave Mitchell rushed toward the stables. There, the terrified horses were whinnying and crashing about. Disregarding his own safety, Dave Mitchell calmed the herd amidst the hail of bullets, attempting to lead them out of the danger zone. The enemy planes dived and strafed, bullets kicking up clouds of dust around him, but he did not back down. In that moment, the horses in his eyes were not tools of war, but lives that needed protection. When the air raid ended and the smoke cleared, people found the horses unharmed, but Dave Mitchell's wrist was fractured. Taz looked at this dust-covered young man, and, for the first time, a look of recognition appeared in his eyes. He understood that while this kid might not dare to kill, he possessed a different kind of courage. The courage to protect life, not just to take it. Dave Mitchell was sent to the hospital for treatment, where he met a gentle nurse named Anne. The hospital was a haven from the war, and also a crossroads of life and death.
Dave! We'll be back with the regiment in no time.
We were on a stunt. I had a Turk in my sights, and I didn't shoot.
Here, Dave Mitchell poured out his heart to Anne about his fear of killing, and his doubts about himself. Anne did not mock him. Instead, she gave him the warmest comfort. She told Dave Mitchell that true bravery lies not only in daring to kill the enemy, but in daring to face one's true self. This brief time of warmth became the softest support in Dave Mitchell's heart, making him realize that he wanted to survive and return not just for himself, but for those waiting in the distance.
I'll get back as soon as I can.
Meanwhile, the gears of war were spinning faster. The British forces welcomed a new commander, General Allenby. This iron-willed general brought a bold plan. Instead of grinding against the heavily defended Gaza, they would strike unexpectedly, heading straight for the other end of the Turkish line, Beersheba. Beersheba, an ancient city in the heart of the desert, held abundant water sources and was a key hub supporting the entire front line. Taking Beersheba would cut off enemy supplies and crumble their entire defense, but this plan faced enormous risks. The army had to cross a vast desert. Without water, both men and horses would die of thirst before reaching the battlefield. Moreover, they had to capture the city and seize the wells within a single day, or else it would be a journey of no return. To ensure the plan's success, British intelligence officer Major Meinertzhagen devised a brilliant Haversack Ruse. This major was an unconventional eccentric who loved ornithology and carried birdwatching notes with him. He understood the psychology of the Turkish commanders well and decided to exploit it. During a reconnaissance mission, he deliberately encountered a Turkish patrol and feigned a panicked retreat, dropping a blood-stained backpack. Inside the pack were carefully forged documents implying that the main British attack would still be on Gaza, and that the move on Beersheba was merely a diversion.
Morning, Major.
Morning. Perhaps you could help me, nurse.
To make this intelligence look seamless, Major Meinertzhagen even enlisted a nurse to forge a letter from a wife to her husband on the front lines. The letter mentioned their newborn child, and the lines were filled with longing and worry for her husband. The letter was written so sincerely and movingly that even the nurse responsible for the forgery was moved to tears.
wish you were here now. I am longing for you, as I have ever since you left me. And I would love to show you our little baby son. He is so good. I look forward so very much to the day when we can hold our little son and be together for the rest of our lives, in peace. Your loving wife, Anne.
When this blood-stained backpack was presented to the Turkish commander, that warm family letter completely dispelled their doubts. Although the German advisor remained skeptical in the face of such conclusive evidence, he had to believe the British target was Gaza. Consequently, the main force of the Turkish army was redeployed toward Gaza, leaving the defense of Beersheba relatively weak. The turning points of history often hide within such seemingly insignificant details. A forged family letter, exploiting shared human emotion, became a weapon that decided the fate of thousands. This has to be seen as a form of dark humor, and also the cruelest footnote to war. Finally, the day of the attack arrived. October 31st, 1917, codenamed Z-Day. The Australian Light Horse regiments received their orders and began that long-distance raid that would go down in history. Tens of thousands of soldiers and thousands of war horses marched silently under the scorching sun. It was a race against time and a contest against physiological limits. The horses had not drunk water for 2 full days. Their throats were parched and cracked, their steps heavy, yet they obediently carried their masters, marching toward an unknown fate. Dave Mitchell had also returned to the ranks. Although his wrist hadn't fully healed, he didn't want to miss this battle, nor did he want to abandon his comrades. In this moment of uncertainty between life and death, being with his brothers was the greatest comfort. However, the battle did not proceed smoothly. Although the infantry units made some progress on the southern flank, the Turkish defensive lines on the outskirts of Beersheba remained firm. Time ticked away, second by second. The sun began to dip west, its golden afterglow spilling over the desert, dyeing everything a blood-red color. By now, there were less than 2 hours left until sunset. The atmosphere in the command post was suffocatingly grave. General Chauvel faced a desperate situation. The infantry could not break the defense line before dark. If they failed to capture the wells of Beersheba before sunset, these tens of thousands of soldiers and horses would die of thirst in the desert when the sun rose the next day. Retreat? There was no way back. In this critical moment, a crazy idea was born. Let the light horse launch a frontal charge just like traditional cavalry. Facing skepticism, the commander gave a reason that bordered on a gamble. We have no choice. Moreover, our horses are too thirsty. They smell the water, and they will run faster than ever before. The 4th and 12th Light Horse regiments, totaling 800 brave men, began to assemble in the dusk. There were no rousing speeches, no tragic farewells. They knew that this departure might be their last. Dave Mitchell stroked his warhorse, feeling its rapid breathing. He could sense that the horse also knew what was about to happen. The charge began. At first a walk, then a trot, and finally a full gallop. The earth trembled under the horse's hooves and the kicked-up dust blotted out the sun. The Turkish defenders watched the rolling dust in the distance, initially thinking it was another British feint. It wasn't until they saw those cavalrymen waving bayonets and rushing towards them like arrows from a bow that they realized in terror. These madmen were really charging. The Turkish artillery began to bombard. Shells exploded within the cavalry ranks, sending men and horses tumbling. But the torrent of the charge did not pause for a second. Instead, it grew faster. The soldiers lay low on their horses, eyes fixed dead on the positions ahead. As the distance closed, a miracle occurred. Because the light horse charge was too fast, the Turkish artillerymen couldn't adjust their sights in time, and the shells fell harmlessly behind the cavalry lines. These war horses, desperate for water, unleashed an astonishing power, seemingly transforming into a storm in the desert, unstoppable. The Turkish machine gunners pulled their triggers, spewing tongues of fire. Bullets poured onto the cavalry like rain. Some men were hit and fell, but more surged forward. At this moment, Dave Mitchell followed closely behind Taz. In his ears were only the sound of the wind and hoofbeats. When the cavalrymen reached the trenches, the Turkish soldiers were stunned. According to convention, light horsemen should dismount and shoot from outside range. But these men did not stop. They urged their horses to leap, soaring like birds over the wide trenches. This leap crossed the conventions of tactics, crossed the boundary between life and death, and crossed a chapter in history. After breaking through the first line of defense, the light horsemen did not linger, but galloped wildly toward the wells inside the city. At this point, the Turkish commander ordered the wells destroyed in a mutual destruction attempt. But it was too late. The speed of the cavalry outpaced the burning of the fuses. In the chaotic street fighting, Dave Mitchell and his comrades engaged in a fight to the death with the enemy. It was the most primal, cruel slaughter. Without the distance of long-range fire, every thrust was accompanied by blood and screams. In a critical moment when Dave Mitchell was targeted by a Turkish soldier, Taz, who had always been so strict with him, rushed over without hesitation. Taz used his own body to block the bullet, taking down the enemy at the same time. The battle ended. The British forces miraculously captured Beersheba, and the wells remained intact. When night completely fell, the surviving war horses finally drank the sweet well water. They sucked it up in great gulps. It was the source of life. Back at the hospital, Anne searched anxiously for Dave Mitchell. Fortunately, he survived, but he knew that a part of him had been left forever in that desert. Anne might never know that the words she had casually written had indirectly contributed to this great victory and preserved the life of the man she loved. This battle, known as the Charge of the Light Horse, became a miracle in military history. It was the last large-scale cavalry charge, marking the end of an era. This story is not just about the victory or defeat of war. It tells us that in the face of the massive torrent of history, individual destiny may seem insignificant. But it is precisely these insignificant individuals, those moments of blocking a bullet for a comrade, that courage to choose to charge despite despair, that converge into the most dazzling light of the human spirit.
Poor bastard. He's got it through the lungs. Isn't there anything we can do?
We recount legends not because we wish to glorify war, but because we must remember that even in the darkest moments, humanity and love still tenaciously exist, just like that well in the desert, remaining clear after the fires of war, nourishing souls that thirst for life.